everyone, my name is Swanee, and thank you so much for stopping by and checking out my channel. Now for today's video, I'm going to be doing a tier list of every single weapon that you can currently get in Helldivers 2. Now as of recording this video, the game has been out 1 week, and I have been grinding non-stop to bring you guys this video. I am the max level, which is level 50, and I've unlocked every single weapon that you can currently get in the game, including the ones from the Battle Pass / Special Edition version of the game that you can get. And I wanted to test those weapons as well to see if they are worth your money or your time invested. So as of recording this video, it has been 1 week since the game released. So if you're watching this in the future and they've added more weapons, or if they've done a bunch of balancing updates, then obviously this video might not be that accurate. But if they do add more weapons and if they do a big balancing update, then I'll be sure to make another updated video. So with that said, let's jump straight into the list. So I'm going to go in order as they appear in the weapon menu, and to start us off is the default assault rifle. It's the AR-23 Liberator, and honestly, this weapon isn't too bad, especially compared to some of the others in this list. It's the very first weapon that they give you just by default when you play the game, and it's okay. It's got a decent rate of fire. It has a capacity of 45 rounds, so you're able to get a lot of shots off before you have to reload, and I'm glad that they made this starting weapon as good as it is, because, everyone's going to have this weapon for a long time before they start to get other unlocks. And this weapon will carry you quite some ways. It's not as useful in the late game content, but overall I don't have too many complaints about it. I think it's a good starter weapon, and compared to a lot of the others on this list, I think it's pretty good. So I'm actually going to put the starting default weapon, the A23 Liberator, up at A tier. So the second weapon on our list is the AR-23P Liberator Penetrator. Now I do actually enjoy this weapon as well. This one comes with some medium armor penetrating, so it does hit a little bit harder than most of the weapons in the game. Now by default, it's a burst weapon and you can change the rate of fire to single shot, but this is going to be your mid-range assault rifle. This is not the weapon you want to use if you like to get up close and personal. This weapon comes with 3 different variations of scopes, so if you want to go into first person and play around with the different zooms, this is a great weapon to just sit back at a distance. Maybe your teammates are pushing forward. You can sit back and help pick off the enemies. The magazine only holds 30 rounds though, so you are going to be burning through ammo pretty quickly. That's the one downside. But overall, I don't have too many complaints with this weapon either. If you like 3-round burst weapons and you like to be mid-range, I think this is also a pretty good option. So I'm going to put this one also up at A tier. So up next is the AR-23E Liberator Explosive. So this is the third assault rifle on our list. It says it's a modified Liberator featuring explosive rounds and a red dot sight, trades increased damage for increased recoil. So it does have a higher base damage. The capacity is also at 30 rounds. It has light armor penetrating and it has explosive shots. So this is the first weapon that you can unlock in the Steel Veterans Warbond. So to access the Steel Veterans Warbond, you have to either spend real money or just grind like crazy and save up enough of the in-game credits to get this Warbond. So this weapon is definitely not easy to get, but I wanted to test it out to see if it was actually worth your time or money, and honestly, not really. It's not bad, but it's not really good either. The explosive rounds will have a little AoE effect, so if there's 2 or 3 enemies beside each other, the explosive will do splash damage and will hit multiple targets at the same time. So it's pretty decent in that regard at taking out large clumps of enemies if they're all clustered together, so it's really good at killing off the bugs. But in my experience, it's definitely better fighting the bugs than it is the robots, because the robots just don't cluster up nearly as much as the bugs do. So the explosive rounds are kind of nice, but I just don't feel like this weapon is as good as the other two. So I'm actually going to put this weapon up at B tier. It's not as good as the other 2 assault rifles, but it's not necessarily bad. So up next, we're getting into the marksman rifles. And to start us off, we have the R63 Diligence. Now, I'm going to be blunt and just say it straight up that this weapon sucks. It is awful. Don't use this weapon. Honestly, I wouldn't bother unlocking it. Don't spend your points on it. Save them for something else. Literally anything. Just get yourself a cape or a helmet or anything. Do not unlock this weapon. Just completely skip out on this weapon. It is horrible. So this is one of 2 marksman rifles that we have that's meant for medium to long range, and it is just abysmal. It only has a 20 round capacity, so you're going to burn through ammo, and it's pretty much going to take all 20 of those bullets to take out even the smallest of enemies. This weapon is just trash. I don't have any other way to put it, and I'm putting it at D tier. It is just awful, avoided at all costs. So moving on to the next marksman rifle, the R63CS Diligence Counter Sniper Rifle. This one has a capacity of 15, but the damage numbers go from 112 up to 128. So you're trading off 5 points of capacity to do a little bit more damage. And in this weapon's case, it's definitely worth it. This is by far the better of the 2 marksman rifles. It's not even remotely close. If you're going to use a ranged weapon and you like to sit medium to far range, I would say either use the AR-23 Liberator Penetrator rifle that we talked about earlier that I put at A tier, or use this one, because this one's actually not too bad. It does a fairly decent amount of damage. It's going to take out the small to medium targets fairly easily. It does struggle a little bit with some of the big tankier enemies, but overall this weapon isn't too bad, and I was having a lot of fun using it, so I'm going to put this one up at A tier as well. So if you're going to get either of the 2 marksman rifles, definitely get this one. So next up, we're getting into the SMGs. This is the SMG that you get from the Super Citizen Edition, so you're going to have to fork out some real world money to get this weapon. So is it worth spending real money? Honestly, probably not. Now this weapon isn't necessarily bad, it's just not amazing. Now the major downside that this weapon has is that the recoil is just insane. When you fire this thing, the recoil just goes directly straight up and you kind of have to like fight the recoil the entire time. And this one by far has one of the worst recoils out of all the weapons. But it does a fairly decent amount of damage. It has a capacity of 50 rounds, so you can pump a ton of bullets into your enemies before you have to reload. It says that the recoil is only 20, but I think that's either just a lie or a bug, because the recoil is crazy with this thing, and that's mainly because the rate of fire is 1,380, so it's got a pretty crazy rate of fire. But the cool thing about the SMGs is that they're one-handed, so as you're running away from enemies, you can turn around and shoot them as you're running. So you can kind of like get the pressure off of your back as you're trying to escape, so that's a huge plus. And one-handed weapons can be used with the ballistic shield, which is also pretty cool. So overall, I don't have too many complaints with this weapon. It's not bad, but it's not great. Is it worth real-world money? No, but if you're going to spend the money and get the special perks anyway, you know, it's just kind of an added bonus. But I'm going to put the MP98 Knight at B tier. So next up is the second SMG. It's the SMG 37 Defender, and in my opinion, this is one of the best weapons in the entire game. Something just feels right about this weapon. I don't really know how to explain it, because when you look at the stats, it's pretty much worse in every way except for damage than the previous weapon. But the SMG 37 Defender does 20 more damage than the MP98 Knight, and you can definitely tell. I just love everything about this weapon. It's one-handed, so like I said previously, you can turn around and shoot it from behind. You can use it with ballistic shields. It has almost no recoil, coming in at 10 points of recoil, so you're not fighting it too much when you're shooting this thing. The rate of fire isn't too crazy, and honestly, this feels more like an assault rifle than it does an SMG, and everything about this weapon just feels good. It's good at killing small enemies, it does decent damage to the bigger, tankier enemies, and honestly, this is probably one of the better weapons in the game, and this is going to be our first S tier. When compared to every other weapon on this list, I think this one is just really, really good, and I don't think you're going to regret getting this weapon. So next up, we're getting into the shotguns. We have the SG-8 Punisher. Now, there's actually more shotguns than any other weapon type in this game, so there's a little bit of competition here. And this is the first shotgun that you get to unlock in the game. It comes in at a crazy 360 damage. It has a capacity of 16, the recoil is pretty insane at 110, and its rate of fire is pretty low at a measly 80. It does light armored penetrating, and you have to reload the rounds manually. So if you go through all 16 of your bullets, you're going to have to manually reload 16 of your bullets. So the reload time is going to be pretty slow with this shotgun, but when compared to the other shotguns on this list, this one is honestly probably one of my favorites. It just does so much damage that it's kind of worth the trade-off for the slow reload time. Plus, manually reloading isn't all that bad, because if something's straight up in your face, you can just cancel the reload at any time and fire your weapon. So if you reload 2 bullets, you can just cancel and then fire those 2 bullets and then reload 2 or 3 more. So in terms of shotguns, this one's actually pretty good. I do enjoy this shotgun. It hits really hard, and I'm going to put this one up at A tier. So up next on the list of shotguns, we have the SG-8S Slugger. And this weapon is just a worse version of the previous one. It has pretty much the same exact stats. It does light armor penetrating, and you have to manually reload it. And the only difference is that this one does 80 less damage. So it still has a pretty slow rate of fire. You have to manually reload it, but it's honestly just worse in every way than the previous one. Now it says this is a modified Punisher shotgun firing heavy, high damage slug rounds, perfect for punching big holes in big targets. I feel like this is just a lie, or there's some sort of bug going on, or they just didn't balance this right, but this shotgun just does not feel very good. This shotgun definitely needs some changes because it's just worse in every way than the previous shotgun. It feels like it might have a little bit further range, but it's really not worth the trade-off. So I'm going to put this one down at C tier. I'm not going to put it down at D tier because it's not just straight up trash. Like, you can actually get kills with it. It does kill things. It's just not as good as the previous shotgun. So up next is the SG-225 Breaker. It's a fully automatic shotgun with a high rate of fire. It says it's excellent for controlling crowds and requires frequent reloading. And that's definitely the truth. It only has a capacity of 16, and with it being full auto, you're going to burn through those 16 bullets very quickly. The recoil isn't too bad. The rate of fire is 300, but it has a base damage of 330. Which is just 30 points less than the SG-8 Punisher. So overall, this isn't too bad of a shotgun. I do enjoy this shotgun. It is pretty good at crowd control if there's a lot of those smaller enemy types, like the smaller robots that die in just 1 to 2 hits, or if there's a cluster of those really small bugs. This does a really great job at crowd control. And honestly, this shotgun is probably one of the more fun weapons to use in the game. Now, one of the major downsides, though, is that you are going to be just absolutely burning through your ammo. So if you don't use the supply pack stratagem, which is going to take up one of your stratagem slots, you're going to just run out of ammo, and you're always going to be constantly just searching for ammo. So unfortunately, you're going to have to use one of your stratagem slots to keep this thing full of ammo. And because of that, I'm going to have to put this one down at probably B tier. But if it had a higher capacity for ammo, or if it gets a buff in the future, this could easily be an A tier shotgun for me. So up next is the SG-225 SP Breaker SpraynPray. It says it's a modified breaker shotgun firing birdshot, small pellets which saturate an area to clear up smaller targets. The damage is only 134, the capacity is 32, the recoil is 45, and the fire rate's 300. So this shotgun kind of addresses the issue that I had with the previous one of not having enough bullets. This one comes with a capacity of 32, which allows you to just basically spray and pray like the title says, but the damage drop-off is so significant that it just feels like you're tickling the enemies, and what good does it do you to have 32 bullets if you're doing like no damage? I think this shotgun is absolutely ass. I don't recommend it in any way, shape, or form. I think it's awful, and this shotgun is actually going down to D tier. I think this is one of the worst shotguns in the game. I honestly don't recommend it at all. I would just straight up avoid this shotgun. So next up is the SG-225 IE Breaker Incendiary, which also comes from the Steel Veterans War Bond. So you're going to have to either spend real money on this one or just grind like crazy to get it. It has 180 damage, 25 capacity, 28 recoil, and 300 rate of fire. Honestly, this shotgun just kind of feels gimmicky. It does have a burst fire mode, so if you like burst fire shotguns, you know, this one's for you. And it does set enemies on fire, which is kind of nice because they're going to be constantly taking that tick damage over time. So I found that this weapon works good if you're actually playing close with your teammates and you're all kind of fighting the same targets. But if you branch off on your own, the incendiary damage just isn't really that good. It's not that worth it. You're just going to have a big cluster of enemies that are on fire, and they're still going to just wreck your face. So as cool as it is to have a shotgun that's a burst fire that catches enemies on fire, the fire damage just isn't good enough to justify spending all the time and resources or real money on this weapon, and I can't really recommend it. It's not bad, but it's not good, and I'm going to put this one at C tier. So up next, we get into a whole new category, which is Explosive, with the Jar 5 Dominator. It says, firing jet-propelled rounds, the Dominator trades rate of fire and magazine capacity for increased damage per projectile. The damage is 200, the capacity is 15, the recoil is 75, and the rate of fire is 250. So this is basically just a shotgun that shoots explosive rounds. I don't really know why it's in its own category and not with the other shotguns. And this is the final weapon that you can unlock in the Steel Veterans War Bond. So like previously, you have to either grind like crazy or spend money to get this. So you would think that this weapon would be really good. And sorry to disappoint, but this weapon is pretty awful. It's definitely not worth the time to invest to get this. I played the game for like literally a week straight, grinding every single day to try to unlock this weapon, and I was so disappointed when I finally got my hands on it. It basically does the same thing as the explosive assault rifle from earlier. You know, it's just going to do an AoE effect. If enemies are clumped together, it's going to hit multiple enemies at the same time. Or if you're trying to hit a weak spot on the enemy, you're going to be doing enough splash damage that you're kind of always going to be hitting their weak spot. But the base damage, it says it's 200, but it definitely doesn't feel like 200. Especially in the late game on the highest difficulty, it honestly just feels like I'm tickling them and I'm just spending more time running away than I am standing my ground and fighting. I think this weapon is absolutely awful and it definitely needs a buff, and I honestly can't recommend this weapon over basically any of the others on this list. I was highly disappointed with this weapon and I'm putting it at D tier. So next up we get into the energy-based weapons. These ones are actually pretty interesting. These ones don't reload, but they overheat. We have the LAS-5 Scythe. A laser firing rifle with continuous beam does not need reloading, but if it overheats, a new heatsink must be fitted. Its fire limit is 8. It has 1 recoil because it has no recoil, and it has a stun time of 0 seconds. It's light armor penetrating, it shoots a beam, and it does heat. So this weapon is actually pretty cool. It just does constant damage per second, so if you're helping your teammates and you're all shooting on the same enemy, this weapon is really great at doing teamwork. It has crazy range on it, so if you're trying to hit enemies at a distance, this weapon is pretty good at that. And honestly, I don't really have too many complaints with this weapon. I would definitely save your medals and skip over some of those shotguns and stuff and get this weapon as soon as possible because I don't think you're going to regret it. I really enjoyed this weapon and I'm going to put this one up at A tier. Up next is the final weapon that you can unlock in the base game War Bond. It's the Plas-1 Scorcher. It's a plasma rifle firing a bolt of superheated gas which explodes on impact. Avoid standing in proximity to the blast. It does light armor penetrating and it's explosive. It does 100 damage, the capacity is 15, the recoil is 20, and the fire rate is 250. The only downside that I have with this weapon is that the capacity is 15. In every other regard, I feel like this weapon is amazing. This weapon it's got good range, it does great damage. It says the damage is only 100, but it feels way higher than that. This thing can one-shot kill smaller enemies on the highest difficulty. Like, it can take out those small little robots. It does a great job at taking out those like mini ATST walkers. It can take those out by itself. This weapon is amazing. It's 100% worth the grind. It's the final weapon you can get, and I can't recommend this one enough. I'm glad that, you know, the final weapon was actually worth it. And like I said, the only complaint I have is that the ammo capacity is at 15, so you're going to be just burning through the ammo. But that is honestly the only complaint. This weapon is just going straight up to S tier. It's easily one of the best weapons in the game. Definitely save up your medals because you're going to want to unlock this weapon. So next up, I want to very quickly talk about the secondary weapons. We have the P2 Peacemaker, which is the default pistol. It's honestly not that bad. These secondary weapons are literally just meant to, you know, you don't have any ammo in your primary. You switch to your secondary in like an emergency and fire off some shots to, you know, save your life. All these secondary weapons are one-handed weapons, so you can shoot on the run and you can use them with the ballistic shield. The Peacemaker honestly isn't too bad. It's a pretty good starting weapon, and I'm going to put it up at probably A tier, just because I don't really have too many complaints with it. Moving on, next we have the P19 Redeemer. This one is probably my favorite of the three. It has 60 damage, 31 capacity, the recoil isn't very high, but the rate of fire is 1,100. The rate of fire on this thing is so crazy that you're going to just burn through your ammo, but honestly, this weapon is pretty good at taking out some of those medium targets that are getting up in your face, like the big robots with like the chainsaws and stuff. This thing will basically melt one of those bigger robots in like an entire clip. So this is my favorite of the secondary, so I'm going to put this one up at S tier. I don't think it's as good as like the other two S tier weapons, but in terms of secondary weapons, I think it's an S tier. So now we have the final weapon, which is in the Steel Veterans War Bond, which, you know, like I said before, you have to spend money for it or grind. And this is basically just like a hand cannon. It's a revolver. It's a high damage revolver, which can be reloaded with single rounds, and it's a heavy hitting and reliable sidearm. Now, that part's true. It does hit pretty hard. I do feel like it could hit a little harder though, because the downside is that it only has a capacity of 6 and you have to manually reload it. So it has a very slow reload time. So it feels like you're spending more time reloading than you are actually fighting, but it does hit pretty hard. I feel like it's fairly balanced, but my only complaint is that I wish it did just a little bit more damage. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I think it's a pretty good secondary, so I'm going to put it up at A tier. So that is going to do it for every single weapon in Helldivers 2. Like I said, this game is only a week old, so, you know, things are subject to change. There's probably going to be some weapon buffs here in the near future, but until we get some weapon changes, this is my tier list, and this is my opinion after playing the game nonstop for a week and reaching level 50. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite weapon is in Helldivers 2. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, that way you guys don't miss out on any future videos. And that is going to do it for me, guys, and I will talk to you all next time.